Behind the images of power and money are real people with real stories, plans of hard work, sacrifice, and making the best decisions, turning failure into great achievement. Join us in conversation with leading business owners as we learn the secrets of how to gain long-term success, mistakes made, lessons learned, and how to build the kind of wealth that lasts for generations. Welcome to Wealth Wednesdays, hosted by Chicago Treasurer Melissa Conyears-Ervin. Join us now and build your own success story.
Good afternoon and welcome to Wealth Wednesday, which serves as a virtual opportunity and platform for individuals with success stories to share their story, perspective, and experience. Today's discussion centers on women in male-dominant industries, a crucial topic, given that women only make up about 24% of the workforce in such sectors. I am pleased to introduce three amazing female panelists who are here to talk about succeeding in their respective industries. First, I'd like to welcome Cecilia Cuff, owner of the Nasson Group and the owner of Brunsville Winery. Cecilia is a trailblazer in hotel and restaurant design and embodies a commitment to innovation and inclusivity. Next, we have Melanie Millhouse Jefferies, daughter of the visionary founder, Mr. Wilbur Millhouse, who carries forward the mission of a positive impact established by her family's legacy. As the COO of Millhouse and the owner and principal of Millhouse Development LLC, Melanie oversees a team of 500 members nationwide, contributing to a remarkable revenue exceeding $75 million. And last but certainly not least, we have Ebony J. Kareem, a captivating serial entrepreneur who has achieved remarkable success at the intersection of STEM and beauty. Through the power of education, Ebony leverages her accomplishments to educate and empower students in underserved communities and HBCUs, garnering national attention. Ladies, welcome and thank you for joining us. And let's start with something everyone wants to know: your success stories, because you have incredible backgrounds. And while the three of you come from various backgrounds, I want you to know, as you look back on your career, well, I want to know, as you look back on your career, what are you most proud of that you have accomplished thus far? And Cecilia, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. I do believe that in our successes, there are so many things that are benchmarks. And I think there are some benchmarks in all of our careers, I'm sure, of colleges that we went to and spaces that we've developed. And I think in my industry of hospitality, designing hotels and restaurants, there is something very tangible about the accomplishment of designing a hotel, because you get to see the people enjoying it. You get to see the way it impacts your communities. Every single hospitality project that I've done, I do see as an economic stimulant for the neighborhood in which we build it, which is really powerful. But when I think back to what my proudest accomplishments are, it's those careers that I've helped develop along the way. So every single time one of my, I don't call them students, my mentees, or someone I've had the pleasure of working with or mentoring or coaching through the years, it's always those people and their projects, whether it's a new restaurant opening in Peru or a new restaurant opening somewhere in Chicago, or a client that I've worked with that opens up their first development in Chicago. And we know we were a part of that journey. Every single one of those accomplishments of people that I've mentored, to me, are my proudest accomplishments, because I love to be able to see us continue to make that community impact.
I love that. Melanie?
I would say really being an integral part of my family business has a lot to do with my pride. My father built this enterprise for over 22 years, and to sit as a COO at 33 over a national firm, the largest Black-owned firm for engineering in the nation, I have a great deal of pride of being able to continue that as the second generation, and also add to it, as we talked about Millhouse Development, and that being really the first for us. That's my baby I get to bring to the table. So I'm really excited about very connective tissues of how do we impact communities? How do we bring people together? How do we uplift Black women and men around the nation? And how do we do that through the built environment? So I'm excited to be a part of that and be able to build on it.
Ebony?
So similar to both Cecilia and Melanie's background, I think my biggest accomplishment to date is really truly finding my passion and becoming who my ancestors thought that I would be, right? So when I look at that, the underlying factors are me being a problem solver. So initially I thought that my career was gonna drive me into the field of medicine. So I was a biochem major in undergrad, but always was very connected to young children. My career took a turn and I got into tech, but I was still able to use those basic analytical skills, strategy, right, into STEM that drove me into education, where I was really able to find my passion, right? So not knowing initially that my love for children and giving back was gonna lead me into the tech space.
Very interesting. Sometimes that's not exactly as we plan for our lives, but you take hold to your passion and it really leads into a really greater fulfillment.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, ladies. Well, as a young woman, which all of you are, all of us are, I may say, what were the initial steps that you took to create wealth? Because we're talking about wealth today, and wealth can be defined in so many ways. What were the initial steps that you took to create wealth, especially as a young Black woman? And then how much of it was inherited? How much did you generate on your own? And Melanie, we will start with you.
Yeah.
This is something, as a Black woman, we're saying, how much of it was inherited? That sounds great.
Definitely. And I think just based on my dynamic, you would think a lot of it is inherited. And I think a majority would be inherited from a knowledge base. And I look at it from the setup that my parents did for me. And so both my mother and my father were really integral in making sure that we invested in education. We make sure that we purchase our home and have assets and all of these things. So I feel like what I inherited had a lot to do with the knowledge base that was built and what they shared and how to do some of these things, because my father's 55. Like, I haven't inherited his enterprise yet. I think I am building with him and learning from him. So a lot of the things that I'm doing today are really part growth from me and part inheritance from a knowledge base, because a lot of things that will be inherited for me may come from when my children and their children hopefully receive a lot of the fruits of the labor that are being built today. And it's always a joke in my family that I have to buy the business from him. So it'll be part inherited. It's a combination for me. And I think building on those blocks of, ownership, savings, and all of those pieces, I think it's always a mixture for how I have to approach it.
Ebony?
So I think what's so amazing about us as a people and a culture is that we define wealth very differently, right? So most of us haven't been afforded the opportunity to have wealth inherited in a monetary way, right? So I look at wealth as it pertains to the wisdom and guidance that I received from the matriarchs in my family, right? So although financially they may not have been in a space where they were able to pass down things, but the wisdom and knowledge that I gained, both my grandmother and my mother have always been huge educators. They were like the neighborhood moms and grandmothers, right? And so just being able to inherit that type of wealth as it pertains to wisdom, I think has really afforded me the opportunity to create this foundation and to create the platform, right? And then understanding that it's much bigger than me.
I like that. And that it is. Cecilia?
We were speaking earlier and found out that my parents went to Penn State as she graduated from as well. And so in that journey, I think that the way that I define wealth is the fearlessness that my father and my mother put into me. At no time did I know that I couldn't be anything that I wanted to do or that I couldn't achieve anything. And I think there's a certain wealth in that mindset as a young woman of just being able to push forward knowing that every single obstacle or boundary that's going to come against you is something that you will work through or work around or go straight through, as my father would say. So I think that there's a certain wealth in that. I also do talk a lot about how the hospitality industry is one of the last true playing fields where you can jump generational wealth barriers or gaps if you work really hard. And so my mom called me Little Miss Hospitality when I was 5 years old and was trying to give the trash guy lemonade. I wanted to serve everyone, and being a servant or being in the hospitality industry, which I came to know it as, I've realized that there's a certain wealth in that, because if you learn every position in a restaurant, if you work through hotels or restaurants, you have this capacity to be able to grow pretty exponentially. And I think that there's a certain wealth level in that as well, where you can run your own hotel or own your own restaurants. So I think that hospitality is one of the last true playing fields where if you don't have access to education or you don't have access to some of that knowledge or those earnings, if you do work hard, you can achieve certain levels of success, which I've seen.
So I want the audience to really take hold to what all three young ladies said. We define wealth differently, but what was important was that they mentioned the wealth of knowledge that their parents and the matriarchs in the family provided to them, that wealth of knowledge that later led to monetary wealth that we're talking about today. And so I think that's important for parents to know, because we have so many parents that make sacrifices, which is going to lead to my next question, and really sometimes be discouraged and wonder, how am I pouring into my child? How am I helping my child to become a better person, to later in life be able to have her own or his own wealth and be able to build generational wealth? I think those answers were great, and I think that's an encouragement for parents that are listening. So thank you for that. Which leads to my next question about sacrifices. Now, I'll tell you, as a woman in elected office, as a Black woman in elected office, as a mother in elected office, people always ask me, how do you do it? How do you do it? Now, mind you, they don't necessarily ask the male that question, right? Absolutely. This is the question, and I get this question all the time. How do you do it? How do you do it? And so I do want to ask about the sacrifices that you've had to make, specifically as a Black woman in your career. Let's start with you.
Well, I think time probably is one of them, ranks pretty high, right? Yeah. And that could be sacrificing personal time, time with family, intimate relationships, and then even from a financial perspective, right? Always having to work hard or be the first to accomplish, right? Put more hours into a project. And then we have the systemic barriers, right? So we have the sacrifices with microaggressions and, dealing with that in white corporate spaces.
Yeah. Melanie?
I really look at it definitely from that lens of your last piece, and taking it one more step further of really the mental sacrifices that we have to make. And I really connected to imposter syndrome, because we normally have to show up a certain way, think you have to dress a certain way, and even coming into this room, you have to talk, I belong at this seat, I belong here to, you have to really speak life into yourself and continue to do that. And I think that's more of a mental barrier or a sacrifice that we have to make. And then I think it always ends up with time, especially as a mother and wife, and you go, okay, do I go to a swim meet, or do I go to this event, and do I build my network, or do I show up for my kid, and how do I do both? And so it's a lot of juggling acts that we have to do, and it's a continuous, where's the ROI, which one do I do first?
Return on investment at this swim meet with my child. Return on investment going to this event to network to build a greater business. Now you just spoke truth. Cecilia?
No, I completely agree with those two answers. It's the juggling of social versus career, and I think that plays into all of these things of really that time. And you have at certain point certain choices in your life where you say, I can do the things that maybe feel good, or I can do the things that fulfill me, whether it's especially in hospitality, go to church or go to work. It's go out with my friends or be in community or work. And as specifically as a young woman and trying to beat that imposter syndrome, a lot of times we wind up working 3 times as hard as everybody else, twice as many hours, and you do have to sacrifice part of your true essence because you're focused. And I think that there's a certain value in being really focused on career driven. But at the same time, I think at some point as a community, we're going to have to put a stop to it and balance ourselves out because we shouldn't have imposter syndrome. Everything that we have worked really hard for. And I think those people after us, all the people that we're mentoring and all the young women who are looking at us, they need to see us as humans just as much as they need to see us as leaders and as business and entrepreneurs. So, I definitely think there was a huge sacrifice of time, but I do think that we have to figure out a way collectively as incredible Black female leaders to figure out a way to kind of stop that imposter syndrome.
And that also leads me to a thought that I always say for my sacrifice that I make. I do that so that those behind me won't have to make those great sacrifices. Because the fact of the matter is, being in a male-dominant industry, it does affect why you have to make those choices of sacrifice. Because I believe that if it was more women in those roles, that we would have a greater balance, that there is no expectation such as that. Why do you have to sacrifice the swim meet to go to this networking event? Can the networking event be at a more opportune time so that a working mother doesn't have to make that choice? But it has to be more of the women in the industry to be able to make that change. That's how I keep myself going in this sacrifice. So thank you, ladies. And I know we're helping some people that are listening on today because we all struggle with that. And we all struggle with what choices to make on any given day. And while we're talking about that, I do want to ask about lessons learned, especially as we think about sacrifices, especially when we think about being the minority in the industry that we're in. Let's talk about your lessons learned and really talk about specifically the lessons learned in a male-dominant industry. Let's start with you, Cecilia.
Absolutely. I think my first lesson learned is leading with compassion. As you just touched on, I think that we lead very differently. And you can see in the hospitality industry for years, it was very much male dominated. You see male chefs, male celebrity chefs, you see male restaurateurs. And as a result, there was a certain culture that was actually expected in the hospitality industry that didn't feel healthy. It wasn't nurturing. It wasn't made to build people. And I think as women in any industry, it's our natural instinct to make the things around us more comfortable or more enjoyable or more beautiful or a better experience for all and more, I would even say more communal. So I think it's how to infuse, a lesson learned for me has definitely been how to infuse our maternal instincts into operations, because then we're growing people and we're growing our industries. And I think that sets a tone, and it also sets leadership standards that everyone else is going to follow suit afterwards.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Melanie?
So I had 3 thoughts for this question, and one was really around building your network and allies. And I think that happens in multiple ways, whether that's the same gender, race, opposites, because in a lot of, at least the industries I'm in, I think it would correlate. You have kind of the old way of doing things where you see a woman in the room and maybe you don't speak to them because you're the only 2, and so then you network with everybody else. And I think the new way that is being established is that we're coming together, and now you'll see a group of us in one room, and maybe we ignore everybody else and they come to us because we're building our own table. And so those allies, whether it's the same gender, opposite sex, always can bring something to the table, whether that's, just support from what we have to go through, or even on the ally side, if it's a man, being able to say like, hey, that's not right. And so I think across the board, relationships are important just for, building success. And then my second point was around being your authentic self. And so I think to my earlier point about, how do you dress, or how do you show up as yourself? What hairstyle are you wearing? And really, Black women, I think, get a lot of different words, I'm not going to say which ones, but a lot of words and commentary about how we show up. And I think we have to show up that way because we have a lot of younger women looking at us and we have people that do want to follow. I think we just have to set the norm that we don't have to conform to all of these other things that aren't used to us being in the room. And then my last one, which is more of just my thing, is really male saturated versus dominated and switching the norm of the words. And so dominated for me is a connotation that, you know, somehow that they're superior in the room. I said, there's just sheer more numbers and they're saturating the market, but that doesn't make it better, doesn't make it more effective in any way other than that, you know, at the table we compete and maybe I'm better, maybe you're better, but you just saturate this specific market. And so I think even us changing our terminology of like, there's just a lot of you, doesn't make you better. And so I think it'll change how people kind of feel in their spaces as well.
So I agree with both these ladies, of course. Self-advocacy, right, has been a lesson, not just in the professional space, but in the personal space too, right? I think oftentimes, especially being Black women, we don't always have those safe spaces even amongst each other, right? Because I've had instances in the corporate space, specifically in the public sector. So this is, you know, working with state, local, and federal agencies. And you would think we would be kinder to each other, right? Like, you know, we're both in a similar space, but oftentimes there's this underlying competition, right? So again, leading with love, right? Leading with compassion, being able to be vulnerable, right? In those spaces. And it's more of like a collective mindset. So instead of us being in competition, like, let's look at how we can pull like our unique skill sets together, right? And so again, self-advocacy, authenticity, right? How we show up for ourselves and how we show up for each other. There are spaces that I've been in when I was pregnant and I was nursing. They didn't even have a nursing room, right? But because I had developed these relationships with all white men, they said, when Ebony comes back, we need to have a room for her to breastfeed. You know, and so it's the acknowledgement from being seen, right? And these are issues that I had never vocalized, but because they valued what I brought to the table, they saw the necessity in that, right? Yeah.
So 2 points that I want to bring up. Number one, it took me to be elected as treasurer to really get into this realm of finance as far as the investment management perspective to see with our pension funds and even within the treasurer's office, our broker dealers, just how much money is in the investment industry. And I'm going somewhere with this. When we talk about competing with one another, we are taught that there is a shortage. Yes. We're taught that. And I found that could not be the furthest from the truth. We're taught that there is a shortage, and that's not true. In the investment industry, in the finance industry, there is $69 trillion dollars in assets under management. And Black people manage less than 1% of it. Wow. So what do we compete about?
Right, exactly.
We don't have to compete. In engineering, you're the largest, Millhouse, the largest Black firm, right, as you mentioned, but there are so many others. Why do we have to compete? Why do we have to compete? Why do we have to compete?
And it creates a crabs in a barrel, which is destructive to I think that mentality is destructive to Black businesses. I mean, I think even when we opened Brownsville Winery, we went to Eric Williams from Virtue, and I think he could have either seen another restaurant opening as competition, but he didn't. He wholeheartedly coached us through every aspect of opening the restaurant, which led to our success. So as you said, the more that we all can work together throughout industries to support each other, so important.
Yeah. There's more than enough to go around.
Absolutely.
But my mother taught me that at a young age because society will tell you differently. And so we have to know we don't have to compete. We can encourage one another because there's more than enough to go around. Secondly, what I want to say to us as women, and specifically I'm sitting at a table with Black women that are really dominating in your industry. I will say what I just took from the responses you stated. We don't have to conform to the room. We can transform the room.
Absolutely.
Be ourselves. We don't have to be imposters. I have learned in so many rooms I am accustomed to only me. It's so normal to be the only one that looks like me in the room. So if I see someone that looks like me, I'm shocked.
Right.
I'm shocked.
Right.
And I'm like, yay, right? But I've learned to even be myself in those rooms that I'm alone. And I'm comfortable. We have to learn to be comfortable in ourselves. And we have to know that we've worked hard to get to this table. And so we can't allow anyone to make us think that we have to be someone else. So don't conform, transform.
I love that.
Now, ladies, let's talk about, as the treasurer, I like to talk about finances. And so I do also like to bring truth, right? And we've been speaking truth all this entire segment. But let's talk about, you have great successes. But no doubt there has been some setbacks. No doubt. We all have setbacks. But sometimes people on the outside looking in think that everything is just peaches and cream and there has not been any setbacks. And so I do want to talk specifically about financial setbacks. And I mean, even small setbacks can turn people away and make them give up. Let's talk about setbacks and how you've used those financial setbacks to get to where you are today. Ebony, we'll start with you.
So for me personally, I know as a community, we've always had a challenge with access to capital, right?
Yes.
So when you think about accessibility to just resources and tools, I think the number one challenge for most Black-owned business owners is access to capital. So being able to be savvy and think outside the box. So maybe traditionally, we may not qualify for a traditional commercial loan, but maybe if I go to a community-based, institution, right, where they have special programs, or even if I reach out to my circle, reach out to my tribe, and I say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, this is the amount of money that I need, right, and then having those private investors, which unfortunately, oftentimes is what we've had to do because we don't qualify for the traditional commercial funding. And so there still is a lot of work that needs to be done in that space, but it all goes back to access.
Melanie?
I'm on the same boat. So for at least specifically an example in real estate development, you have to have money. You have to have a lot of money to play in that game. And so one of our projects on 47th and Cottage in all of our neighborhoods, it's hard. You have to have pre-development funds just to figure out what you want to do. You have to have all of this access to capital that is very hard to come by. And even as a bigger generational company, I can't take all the funds from one firm to put into another firm because we have to feed 500 people every week, right, or every other week. And so it has been extremely difficult to really get to that finish line. It has taken those creative measures, whether that's applying for grants, looking for other institutions that understand community development, understand where those inequities, gaps, and red lines come from, and that you're not going to find a traditional tenant here. You have to make concessions for how we have to bring things to the table. And so we're, I think, getting close to that line. I wouldn't say we've crossed the official finish line yet, but I think we're very close to closing. And so I'm hoping a lot of these unique measures that we're putting together and these conversations with our new Black commissioner, all these things will help move things into transformation of how people access the capital and how young Black developers across Chicago develop for themselves. Yeah.
I mean, again, I absolutely agree with both of what they said. I think first, there's been no better time for somebody to work in the real estate realm or to try to achieve wealth or develop in Chicago. We've got a mayor who is invested in developing our communities on the south and west sides. We've got an incredible commissioner and deputy mayor, all who understand disinvested communities and what that means, and also understands the support needed from a equity gap to be able to be able to move. So if there's any time to be able to develop or open a business or be a small business or go out on that limb, I think there's never been more support coming from the city of Chicago. I mean, and even in the last administration as well. I think there's never been a greater time to be in that realm. Setbacks, I remember when we were trying to access funding for Bronzo Winery specifically, some of the answers that we got were, you're going to open what, where, but when we looked at our community, there was more Black wealth in the Bronzeville community around where we built Bronzeville than the entire city of Chicago combined amongst the Black community. And so we knew that we lived in this community. We knew what we were looking for, and we knew the leakage that was coming from us leaving our community. And so we heard no. We probably went to 30 different lenders, and went to try to get access to capital. And on the 31st, and talked to so many different investors, we finally found a great banking partner in BMO Harris Bank, or in BMO Bank, because they were in the neighborhood, they were in the community, and after, everybody said no, from the non-traditional lenders like CCLF and LISC to, big banks, everybody said no, or people, and it wasn't because we didn't have a background. This would probably be the 30th restaurant that I've opened. I own 2 restaurants. I've designed restaurants and hotels across the country and across the world. My business partner has been in business in Chicago for 26 years. But it took one person going on a limb, and now we've got an incredible relationship. So, I think that setback, again, we always look at it as an obstacle, but we're going to go around it. So we kept asking and we kept pitching, and we found somebody who felt comfortable with us, along with funding from the city of Chicago with the development grant. But I would say there's been no greater time for anybody to act now on trying to use the tools that the city of Chicago is putting together for them, all of the programs coming out of the Department of Planning to support small businesses in our communities.
So I always talk about #MyWhy. This right here, #MyWhy. This is why, as treasurer for the city of Chicago, I fight so hard. This is my why. I'm listening 3 very established young women talk about the obstacles to access to capital. And Ebony, when you started the question, you said, well, we're used to this in our community. Why are we used to this?
Oh, that's a very multi-layered. That's a very multi-layered question.
No, we only got a few minutes.
No, we don't have.
But I mean, and that's a rhetorical question. Why are we used to this? Why are we accustomed to being denied as an established business owner, being denied 30 times access to capital? Why are we being denied? This is what we're used to, but that's not normal. We should not be used to that. And we have to, the reason we're at the table, the reason that we're in the room is because we're working to change that. So thank you, ladies. And I will ask one last question, because I will tell you, this has been encouraging. I'm encouraged today. I want you all to know that I am encouraged. And I know those that are listening are encouraged. And we need to hear this. We need to have these candid conversations. Absolutely. Because you are success stories, but we need to know we're not alone in these setbacks. We all share the same experiences. So I'll leave with this. I want you to give the audience some advice that you received about finances, and what advice that you will leave for our attendees today. And let's start with you, Cecilia, work our way around.
I will say, just with timeliness and urgency. There's never been a better time to invest in yourself and partner with the city of Chicago. Use our incredible city and our incredible administration and all the programs that support you to develop your own community. Real estate is an incredible playing field to help access wealth. And in my travels around the world, I don't think that there's a greater city to build wealth through real estate, through development. And again, the city's got such an immense and incredible amount of programs to help access that wealth. So check out all the programs that the city of Chicago has together.
That's good advice.
Absolutely.
That's good advice. Melanie?
Yes, ditto. And I would just say to do that, you definitely have to have your house in order first, right? So I'm known, or the joke of the family, of being able to rub a face off $1. Like, I will save money.
Save money.
I will save some money. So
like that.
really having your savings in place, whether that's 3 to 6 months, depending on, your scenario of kids and education, or if you're single, that amount changes depending on what you need. But I think the first step is have the savings, have that security net, so that when you go to invest and when you go to be risky or something like that, you know that you're not losing your house and all of these things while you're trying to go to the next level. So that would be the main thing that I've taken, is have the security and then go play around with excess if you can find your way to excess. Yeah.
My grandmother used to call it nest egg. Yeah, a nest egg.
Absolutely, mine too. She always say, put your pennies to the side, right? Which meant living below your means, right? I think oftentimes too, especially now with societal pressures and social media,
That's right.
glamorizing these unrealistic lifestyles, right? People are not thinking about long-term anything, right? It's instant gratification. So I know my mother always instilled with us. We even had a budget at a very young age. We learned now we don't balance checkbooks, but back in the day, we were taught to balance a checkbook. We knew how to go grocery shopping, so we understood the cost of living, right? And how much income we needed to bring in the household to be able to take care of us for the month. And so even with my own children, I stress the importance of budgeting, how you come up with a budget. So let's work on a worksheet. But back to Celia's point about access to resources, again, now there's so much more free resources than even when I was young, right? Like, I had to rely on my parents or going to the library, looking at books about finance. But now we have so much free resources. So just being able to tap into that. And then always ask questions, because you don't have to know everything, right?
Yes. I tell you, ladies, this has been encouraging. This has been an awesome conversation. I thank you all for joining us. I believe that it was meant for me to speak with all three of you. I was saying, typically Wealth Wednesdays, we have a one-on-one conversation, but this dynamic of this group today was intentional. And so I thank you for that. I'll tell the audience, these are some hard-working ladies, and I thank them so much for providing this useful information. I will tell you, I can relate to all three ladies. I have visited Bronzeville Winery several times. Everything, I feel like I have not eaten everything off the menu quite yet, so I keep going back. And I will tell you that I have a younger cousin that is an engineer, and I'm so proud of him. And I want more young Black men and women, and young women of color and men of color, to really get into more of the engineering field. So thank you for being an example. STEM and beauty. My 7-year-old daughter, 2nd grade, science is her favorite subject. Awesome. We're working on a project now that I think is gonna take me out in 2nd grade. But her favorite topic, and she just loves beauty. So thank you so much, ladies, for everything that you've done. And if you, as attendees, have missed any of our previous Wealth Wednesday segments, visit www.chicagocitytreasurer.com to rewatch and learn more about other financial education programs that my office has to offer. Thank you for joining today's Wealth Wednesday panel discussion. Until next time, Chicago!